Thank you for joining another episode of Locked On Baylor, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by Prize Picks. I'm your host, Cam Stewart, and we are into full-fledged OC search season. And by that, I mean it's been 3 days by the time you're listening, since Baylor has parted ways with Jeff Grimes, and they have already outlined the kind of OC they're looking for. But how attractive is this job? This is now going to be the third offensive coordinator in 5 years for Dave Aranda, entering season number 5. You know it's a sinking ship. You know one false move and the guy who brought you in is gone. It's a 1-year rental. It's an internship. At best, you get a head coaching job out of it. You do a good job. At worst, you are part of the group that gets canned at the end of the season, or worse yet, your head coach is fired in September and you're there with some schmo filling in, or maybe it's you filling in until the end of the season. So let's take a look at let's take a look at 3 offensive coordinator candidates based off Baylor's profile and what Baylor said they're looking for. Now, if you'll remember, that is someone with head coaching experience. Okay, so that's an important part of the criteria, because I don't think Baylor can attract that many great guys who have had a head coaching experience that are now offensive coordinators. Those guys tend to have their next job be head coaching again, not wallowing in the mire of coordinatorville. And the other criteria I'm going to put in here, the other non sequitur, I guess is the way to put it, is I am eliminating the names Dino Babers and Philip Montgomery. Now, Dino Babers actually fills the void perfectly in terms of coaches who have been a head coach at a good level, a successful offensive coordinator, head coach at a pretty big level in Syracuse and the ACC, and have just been canned and are desperate enough to take on this 1-year internship to just try and stay a relevant coach again. Philip Montgomery, very successful offensive coordinator as well at Baylor, like Dino Babers was, and not a very successful head coach at Tulsa. And the reason I am not putting those two in there is because they are both Art Briles guys. And I just don't think the university is going to touch that. Personally, I don't think so. So I'm just not even including them. So those are the criteria there. Without any further ado, number 1 and the sexiest name on this list, Ed Orgeron. Yes, Ed Orgeron. Need I say more? Successful coordinator, successful position coach on both sides of the ball, national champion head coach, and the defensive coordinator who got him there to that national championship in 2019, none other than Dave Aranda. And now this is where it could be kind of a favor situation. Ed Orgeron hasn't coached in college football since 2020. He seems to be living a pretty nice life. I don't think he's doing any analysis, really. He's not doing any punditry. He is just kind of hanging out. In fact, he's been around Baylor quite a few times because his son, Parker Orgeron, is on the staff here at Baylor. So there's another reason. Okay, we've already seen him on the practice sidelines at Baylor. We've seen him in the Baylor shirts. We've seen him at the Baylor games. Why not throw a bone to your old buddy, Dave Aranda, who desperately needs some help? And what more qualified candidate is out there that's a friend of Dave Aranda than Ed Orgeron? I know you don't really need me to go through his resume. I'm going to go through the resume of all 3 of these guys. But Ed fits the criteria of head coach. He's been head coach 3 times. Ole Miss, USC. Remember, he was the interim. It was 2013 when Lane Kiffin got fired, and they went 6-2 after that. And all the players wanted him to stay. AD didn't. He ends up becoming later the head coach at his kind of alma mater, LSU. So in that 67-47 record, obviously the national championship in 2019, and the guys he's coached under in his decades of coaching, Jimmy Johnson and Pete Carroll, just to name 2. And he also basically gave a start to Monty Kiffin's son, who you now know as Lane Kiffin, and gave the DC job when they were right about to win the national championship at LSU to Dave Aranda. Offensive guy, all in all. That's kind of his MO. But like I mentioned, he's coached on both sides of the ball. In fact, he was the D-line coach at the U under Jimmy Johnson, where he won 2 national championships there and coached 8 All-Americans. 8 in like 5 years. 8 All-Americans. Russell Maryland, number 1 pick in the draft. Cortez Kennedy, Warren Sapp. The last 2 in there have one thing in common. They're both in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, developed by Ed Orgeron. Also recruited a defensive lineman out of Florida by the name of Dwayne Johnson, who is the most famous of anybody on this list. Of course, you know him as The Rock. Super successful head coach, successful offensive guy, successful defensive guy. Part of the reason they want to bring in a head coach, and this is something I'm going to come back to a few times in these analyses, one of the reasons why they put in head coach is not necessarily someone to take Dave's job, not putting an interim in place per se, but more so a guy that can help take a little bit off his plate administratively, who knows how a good program is supposed to be run. Of course, his head coaching stints were up and down. Wasn't all that successful at Ole Miss. His first crack at it had a successful but brief stint at USC. And then the last year at LSU wasn't fantastic. But this guy put together and coached one of the great football teams of this century at 2019 LSU. And he's got the ties with Dave Aranda, and his son is there. Does it almost make too much sense? Like, this is a guy who doesn't have a ton to lose. Like, he already has a great, yet kind of complicated legacy as a football coach. And he's not someone who is just banking his career off this. He might never coach again, and it seems like he's okay with that, which not all coaches can do. Or he can help a brother out in Dave Aranda and step in and be the OC at Baylor. I think he'd be better than Larry Fedora. I'll put it that way. It's not all that likely just because of the pedigree he has, but so on paper, I should say it's not all that likely, but you look more into it and you think, why not? Why not? Bobby Petrino took another OC job and is working on another one incredibly at Arkansas. So why not Ed Orgeron? Does he fit Baylor? Do I care? I guess I should if I disqualify Dino Babers and Philip Montgomery. But look, I mean, so he takes pictures with ladies a lot. You could do a lot worse, man. Do a lot worse. And the guy can flat out coach. I mentioned the defensive players he coached. He also brought in Joe Burrow, who had one of the best, if not the best, college quarterback season in the history of the NCAA. He also overlapped with, was 1 year after Eli Manning. I think he overlapped 1 year with Eli Manning. So, I mean, he's coached some talented guys. Matt Barkley. Okay. He's been in the league 10 years. So it's something. Ed Orgeron. Do you think that is even possible? And how excited would you be for that?